In the parched heart of Texas, beneath a relentless sun that cracked the red earth like ancient scars, Emily walked alongside her mother, Clara, on the dusty road. At 12 years old, the slender girl carried on her shoulders the weight of protecting the one she loved most in the world. The scent of barbecue and roasted corn drifted from a distant fair, mingling with the acrid smell of dust kicked up by horses' hooves. Clara, frail and etched by years of struggle, held her daughter's hand tightly as they sought refuge in a place they could call home. The shadows of the cacti stretched across the desolate landscape, and the suffocating heat made the air shimmer like a mirage. Emily knew she had to be strong, even when her young heart beat wildly with fear. The road seemed endless, winding between rocks and dry bushes, but they kept walking, fueled by the hope of better days ahead. The sound of approaching hooves made Emily instinctively squeeze Clara's hand. A group of 5 men appeared on the horizon, mounted on sweaty horses, and carrying the unmistakable scent of cheap alcohol and cigarettes. Their raspy voices cut through the hot air as they drew nearer, and Emily felt a shiver run down her spine despite the scorching heat. The men stopped before them, blocking the path, and their predatory gazes made Clara instinctively pull her daughter closer. "Well, look what we have here," said the leader with a cruel smile, spitting on the dusty ground. Emily noticed the tremor in her mother's hands and felt a fury rising in her small chest. The sun was directly overhead, casting dark shadows beneath the men's hats, while the hot wind stirred up swirls of sand around the group. The tension was as palpable as the heat itself. "Let us pass," Clara said with a trembling voice, trying to sound firm as she shielded Emily behind her. The men laughed loudly, a harsh sound that echoed across the empty plain. The leader dismounted slowly and deliberately, his boots scuffing the hard ground. Emily saw him reach out a hand toward her mother's face, and something inside her broke like a dam. Without thinking, the girl leaped in front of Clara, her slender arms spread wide in protection. "Don't touch her," she cried with a courage she didn't know she possessed. The man laughed louder, amused by the child's audacity, but his eyes gleamed with cold cruelty. The air was thick, heavy with menace, as the other men positioned themselves in a semicircle around the two. Emily felt her heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo in her ears, but she didn't retreat an inch. The sound of a gunshot ripped through the air like lightning, making the horses whinny nervously and the men turn sharply. On the horizon, a lone figure approached on a brown horse, a dark silhouette against the faded blue sky. John Miller was a tall, strong man, with broad shoulders shaped by years of hard work under the Texas sun. His blue eyes, hardened by the pain of loss, assessed the situation in seconds. His plaid shirt was soaked with sweat, and his leather hat protected a face marked by time and suffering. He held his shotgun with calloused hands, his voice coming out deep and authoritative when he spoke. "I reckon these ladies don't want any company." The men hesitated, recognizing in the rancher someone who knew both the land and the violence it could harbor. The wind blew harder, raising dust between the groups. The tension exploded like a summer storm when the leader of the men spat on the ground and moved to draw his weapon. John was faster, the click of the shotgun being cocked echoing clear and definitive. "You got 3 seconds to get out of my sight," he said, with a calm voice but laden with deadly threat. Emily held her breath, feeling her mother's heart beating fast through the thin fabric of her dress. The men exchanged glances, weighing their options against the steely determination etched on the rancher's face. The sun remained relentless, but now there was something different in the air, a subtle shift that even the horses seemed to feel. After a few seconds that felt eternal, the leader spat again and gestured to his companions. "This ain't over," he muttered, before mounting up again. In a few minutes, the group disappeared on the horizon, leaving only dust and the distant echo of hooves. John dismounted and approached slowly, taking off his hat in a sign of respect. "Are you all hurt?" he asked, his rough voice softened by genuine concern. Clara held Emily closer, still trembling, but managed to shake her head negatively. The rancher looked at the courageous girl and saw something that deeply touched him, the same fierce determination his late wife had shown in protecting the vulnerable. "My name is John Miller," he said, extending his calloused hand. "I got a ranch not far from here. Y'all look like you could use a place to rest." Emily studied the man's face, seeing beyond the wrinkles and unshaven beard the genuine kindness in his eyes. Clara hesitated only a moment before accepting the offer, instinctively understanding that this man, wounded by grief, might be exactly what they needed, just as perhaps they were what he needed to heal his broken heart. John Miller's ranch stretched for acres of red earth under the endless Texas sky, with wooden fences weathered by time and a two-story house that had seen better days. Emily observed everything with curious eyes as they walked down the dirt road leading to the property, noticing how the rancher kept everything organized despite the evident solitude. Clara followed in silence, still processing the events of the road, but gradually relaxing as she perceived the genuine kindness of the man who had saved them. The house's porch had rocking chairs covered in dust, and Emily imagined what it would be like to sit there on warm afternoons, watching the sunset paint the horizon orange and red. John pointed to the well in the center of the yard, explaining that the water was fresh and abundant even in the driest summers. The smell of hay and leather mingled with the scent of wild roses that grew untamed beside the house, creating a sense of home neither of them had felt in a long time. Inside the house, the absent presence of Martha, John's late wife, was palpable in every carefully preserved detail. Emily ran her fingers over the handmade lace curtains, while Clara admired the porcelain plates precisely lined in the kitchen. John moved through the house with a mixture of pride and melancholy, explaining how Martha had chosen every piece of furniture, every paint color on the walls. She used to say a house ain't made of wooden nails, but of the happy moments that happen inside it, he murmured, running his hand over the back of a chair where his wife used to embroider. Emily felt a pang in her heart as she noticed the still raw pain in the rancher's eyes. Clara gently touched John's shoulder, a simple gesture that conveyed understanding without words. The house seemed to sigh with the presence of new life, as if waking from a deep, melancholic sleep. The first weeks on the ranch brought a comforting routine neither of them had experienced in years. Emily woke before dawn to help John feed the horses and chickens, her small hands quickly learning the tasks of rural life. Clara naturally took over the household, cooking hearty meals that filled the kitchen with delicious aromas and brought genuine smiles to the rancher's face. Evenings were spent on the porch, where John told stories about the land and the animals, while Emily listened fascinated and Clara sewed by lamplight. The sound of crickets and the creaking of the rocking chairs created a nightly symphony that soothed their wounded hearts. Gradually, laughter began to echo through the house again, and John realized that his property was transforming into a true home once more. The loneliness that had consumed him for 2 years began to give way to something he had forgotten how to feel: hope. The tranquility was shattered when the same men from the road appeared on the property one stifling afternoon, this time in greater numbers and visibly intoxicated. Emily was in the barn when she heard the menacing voices, and her blood ran cold as she recognized the cruel tone of the group's leader. John emerged from the house holding his shotgun, but this time the situation was different. They had brought reinforcements and seemed determined to finish what they had started on the road. Clara appeared on the porch, pale but determined, holding a kitchen knife with trembling hands. "Y'all ain't welcome here," John said with a firm voice, but Emily noticed the tension in his shoulders. The men laughed loudly, spitting on the ground and making vulgar comments about Clara. Emily felt the same fury she had experienced on the road, but now she was home, in the place she had learned to love, and that made the threat even more unbearable. The hot wind kicked up dust around the restless horses, creating an atmosphere charged with danger. The confrontation erupted when one of the men moved to advance toward the porch where Clara stood. John fired a warning shot into the air, but in response received a volley of shots that shattered the house windows and made Emily dive behind a pile of hay. Clara screamed her daughter's name, her voice cutting through the air like a blade, while John took cover behind the stone well. Emily saw one of the attackers manage to flank John, aiming at his unprotected back. Without a second thought, the girl picked up a large rock and threw it with all her might, hitting the man in the head and making him stumble. The sound of the rock finding its target echoed like thunder, followed by the attacker's angry yell. John took advantage of the distraction to disarm the man, but he realized they were clearly outnumbered. The smell of gunpowder mingled with the acrid odor of fear, while the relentless sun continued to beat down on the red Texas earth. The unexpected arrival of Sheriff Thompson and his 2 deputies completely changed the course of events. The sound of galloping hooves and the cloud of dust on the horizon brought hope to the ranch's defenders. John had secretly sent a message to town through a neighbor, fearing exactly this situation. The bandits, realizing they were surrounded, tried to flee but were captured after a brief but intense chase across the Texas plains. Emily emerged from the barn with scratches on her arms and tears in her eyes, running into Clara's arms, who hugged her with desperate strength. John approached slowly, relief evident on his tired face, and for the first time in 2 years, he genuinely smiled. The sheriff greeted the rancher with a firm handshake, praising Emily's courage and promising that those men wouldn't bother anyone again. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in golden hues, the makeshift little family gathered on the porch, finally at peace and safe. The months that followed brought a profound transformation in the lives of the 3. Emily grew not only in age but in maturity, taking on responsibilities on the ranch with the determination of someone much older. Clara blossomed under John's respectful affection, her fragility giving way to a serene strength that illuminated every corner of the house. John, in turn, discovered that loving again did not diminish Martha's memory, but honored it in a different and equally precious way. Mornings began with the crow of roosters and the clatter of pots in the kitchen, where Clara brewed strong coffee and baked warm biscuits. Emily learned to milk cows and care for horses, her small hands becoming skilled with rural tasks. Afternoons were dedicated to studies, with John teaching the girl arithmetic and reading, using books Martha had carefully kept. At night, the family gathered in the living room, where John played the guitar while Clara sewed and Emily drew in the notebooks she had received in town. The local community gradually accepted the small, unconventional family, especially after witnessing Emily's courage and Clara's kindness during the violent events. At church on Sundays, the older women chatted amicably with Clara, sharing recipes and advice on country living. Emily befriended other children in the area, playing after services and learning about Texan culture through stories told by the elders. John regained his place of respect in the community, no longer seen as the solitary widower, but as the man who chose to open his heart to those in need. The local pastor, Reverend Matthews, discreetly blessed the family's unofficial union, understanding that sometimes God works through unusual circumstances. Rural festivals became special occasions, where John proudly introduced Clara and Emily as his family, while the girl impressed everyone with her intelligence and determination. Their first anniversary on the ranch was celebrated with a simple but meaningful party. Clara baked an apple pie using a recipe Martha had left in a yellowed notebook, a gesture that deeply touched John's heart. Emily had grown several inches, and her personality had fully blossomed, showing a unique blend of courage and kindness that won everyone over. John built a swing on the big oak tree in the yard, the same spot where Martha used to sit and read. The party was attended by neighbors and friends from town who brought homemade food and joyful music. Sheriff Thompson appeared with his family, proudly recalling how brave Emily had been during the confrontation. As the sun set, painting the sky pink and gold, John held Clara and Emily's hands, silently grateful for having found a second chance at happiness when he least expected it. Winter brought unexpected challenges when a snowstorm, rare for the region, isolated the ranch for several weeks. Emily discovered the fascination of white flakes covering the normally arid landscape, building snowmen and making snow angels in the fresh snow. Clara and John used the forced time indoors to plan improvements for the property and discuss Emily's future, including the possibility of sending her to a better school in town. The long nights were filled with card games, reading aloud, and deep conversations by the crackling fireplace. John told stories about his youth and his frustrated dreams, while Clara shared painful but important memories about life before they came to Texas. Emily listened intently to everything, understanding that she was part of something bigger than a simple family. She was part of a story of redemption and second chances. When the snow finally melted, leaving the land more fertile, everyone felt they had gone through a period of internal growth. The arrival of spring brought news that would change the family's plans forever. A lawyer from Houston appeared at the ranch with documents stating that Clara had inherited a small fortune from a distant uncle. The money was enough to ensure a comfortable life and, more importantly, an excellent education for Emily. Clara cried upon receiving the news, not from sadness but from gratitude for finally being able to repay John's kindness in a tangible way. She proposed using part of the money to modernize the ranch, installing new equipment and expanding operations. John initially hesitated, his pride stung by the idea of being financially dependent on Clara, but Emily convinced him with her simple and direct logic. Families help each other. Isn't that what you always say? The decision was made at a family meeting in the kitchen, over strong coffee and homemade biscuits, sealing their commitment to build a prosperous future together. The inheritance represented not only financial security, but the confirmation that they deserved all the happiness they had found. 5 years later, Emily was graduating as the top student in her class at the town school, her eloquent speeches impressing teachers and peers alike. Clara and John had officially married in a simple ceremony at the local church, with Emily proudly serving as maid of honor. The ranch prospered with the implemented improvements, becoming one of the most productive in the region. John discovered a late passion for writing, documenting the stories of the rural community in a book to be published the following year. Clara opened a small school on the ranch for neighborhood children, using her own experience of struggle to inspire and educate. Emily, now a 17-year-old young woman, had received a scholarship to study law at the university, determined to protect other families like hers. On the porch of the house, under the bright stars of the Texan sky, the family gathered every evening, knowing that they had built something precious through courage, love, and faith in human kindness. The girl who once faced violent men to protect her mother had become a strong woman, ready to protect others who needed justice. Emily's departure for university was a bittersweet moment that brought tears of pride and sadness. Clara carefully packed her adopted daughter's clothes in a leather suitcase John had bought especially for the occasion, including the blue dress she had hand-stitched for formal university events. John triple-checked the documents and recommendation letters, his chest swelling with paternal pride at seeing how Emily had blossomed from a frightened girl into a determined and intelligent young woman. On the morning of her departure, Emily hugged each animal on the ranch, whispering promises of return as tears flowed freely down her sun-kissed Texan face. The entire community gathered at the train station to say goodbye, Reverend Matthews offering a special blessing, and Sheriff Thompson introducing Emily to contacts who could help her in the big city. Clara held John's hand tightly as the train disappeared on the horizon, both knowing they had given the girl all the tools necessary to conquer the world. The first few months without Emily were challenging for Clara and John, who had to rediscover their marital intimacy after years centered on raising the girl. The house seemed strangely silent without Emily's laughter and lively conversations, but gradually they found a new routine that honored both the past and the present. Clara expanded her school, now receiving children from more distant ranches, while John began writing his memoirs, including the story of how a courageous girl had transformed their lives. Emily's letters arrived weekly, filled with stories about demanding professors, classmates, and academic discoveries that fascinated her. John read each letter aloud during dinner, his eyes gleaming with pride at every reported achievement. Clara kept a special diary where she noted all the news about Emily, creating a loving record of her educational journey. On cold winter nights, the couple warmed by the fireplace, planning surprises for Emily's visits during holidays. Emily's second year at university brought unexpected challenges when an economic crisis hit the country, affecting even prosperous ranches like John's. Clara and John faced financial difficulties for the first time since the inheritance, but adamantly refused to pull Emily out of university. They sold a few acres of less productive land and reduced personal expenses to a minimum, living more simply but maintaining the dignity and love that had always characterized their family. Emily, upon discovering their difficulties, offered to return and work on the ranch, but John was firm in his refusal. "You're our investment in the future, girl. Your education is worth more than any money." Clara supported her husband completely, writing encouraging letters that hid her own financial concerns. The local community, recognizing the family's kindness over the years, discreetly organized a collection to help with university expenses. John and Clara accepted the help with humility, promising to repay it when the situation improved. Emily's graduation was the proudest moment in John and Clara's lives, who traveled to the city in their best clothes, carrying hearts full of anticipation. Emily, now a lawyer graduated with honors, spoke as the class valedictorian, talking about social justice and the importance of protecting the most vulnerable. Clara openly wept as she watched the girl she had raised ascend the stage with such elegance and confidence, remembering the difficult days on the dusty Texas road. John etched every word of the speech into his memory, knowing he would recount that moment for future generations. After the ceremony, Emily introduced her adoptive parents to professors and colleagues, describing them as the true heroes of her story. The celebratory dinner was simple but memorable, held in a small restaurant where the family toasted the future with cold lemonade. Emily announced her decision to return to Texas to open a law practice focused on helping rural families and defending the rights of the underprivileged. Emily's return to Texas marked the beginning of a new era for the Miller family. She established her office in the town near the ranch, specializing in labor rights cases and defending small rural landowners. John and Clara became her biggest supporters, with John helping with historical case research and Clara offering her school as a venue for community meetings on legal issues. Emily quickly gained a reputation in the region as a competent and compassionate lawyer, always remembering the lessons of courage she had learned at 12 years old. Her first major case involved defending a family of Mexican immigrants against exploiters trying to steal their land, echoing her own experience of vulnerability. Clara and John watched proudly from the back of the courtroom as Emily presented brilliant arguments that secured victory for her clients. The ranch prospered again with the improved economy, allowing the family to establish a fund to help other underprivileged children attend university. 10 years after that fateful day on the dusty Texas road, Emily married David, a young doctor who shared her values of social justice and community service. The ceremony was held on the ranch, under the shade of the oak tree where Emily had played during her childhood, with the entire community present to celebrate. Clara, now with silver hair but still vibrant, organized a reception that combined Texan traditions with touches of elegance Emily had learned at university. John, emotional, walked Emily down the improvised aisle in the garden, whispering in her ear that Martha would have been proud of the extraordinary woman she had become. Reverend Matthews, now older but still eloquent, officiated the union, speaking about how love and courage can transform destinies. Emily and David took up residence in town, but spent every weekend at the ranch, keeping alive the family ties that had been forged through adversity. The story of the courageous girl who protected her mother had become a local legend, inspiring other children to be strong in the face of difficulties, proving that courage has no age and that true families are built with love, not just blood.